Hello class. In this video we are going to talk about the conventions from the ICD 10 CM guidelines. Now I downloaded the guidelines from the CMS website, so you could use the guidelines that are in your book. I chose to download the guidelines from the CMS website, so if you Googled, as I have here, this is them in a PDF form. Now I downloaded them and they will be uploaded in the course site, so you can either print those out or pull them up on your screen, or you could pause this video and open up the guidelines in your ICD-10 CM book, in your coding book. In the beginning of the guide, you'll see the guidelines in the beginning of the book, and you want to find the page that starts with Section 1, Conventions, General Coding Guidelines, and Chapter Specific Guidelines. Now the guidelines are set in stone, so no matter what publisher you have purchased your book from, the guidelines will be exactly the same. So I want to talk about the conventions. Now you've already seen the video on the basics to coding, and if you've read the chapters, it has already spoken to this. You would look up your main term of your diagnosis in the index to diseases. That's what number 1 is saying here. You would look it up there, and then you'd pick up your codes and you would look your code up in the tabular section, which is the numerical index of the ICD-10 codes, the diagnosis codes. You never want to code from the alphabetical index. You always want to code, your final coding would come from the tabular list. So you, using your main terms and your subterms, look them up in the alphabetical index, which is also known as the index to diseases. See the codes that it returns to you, and then you go to the tabular section and you look up the codes numerically. That's where you're going to find how many digits you are required, or how many characters. So if you had learned ICD-9, they referred to the numbers in the diagnosis codes as digits. Now they refer to them as characters. From this point on, I will try to remember to refer to them as characters. So in the tabular list is where you will see your excludes notes, your includes notes, any additional coding directions, as well as how many characters is required of the code. The format and the structure talks about it having a 3-character category. So when you first look up your code, the first 3 characters in the code will be listed, and that will be the category. It'll give you the category of the types of diseases or conditions that you're coding. Following that will be the more detailed. You will see the subcategories, and the subcategories could be 4 or 5 codes. But in totality, your codes could have up to 7 characters. And when you're looking at your codes, in the front of the code will be a symbol that will tell you whether you need 4 characters, 5 characters, 6, or 7. I will have a video also on the course space where I will cover that, and that video will be dedicated to that. So 3 tells you that they use the codes for reporting purposes. Right? So you have to code to the highest specificity. You won't be coding categories. You'll be coding to the highest specificity with the number of characters in total that is needed to code that. There is a placeholder character. Some of the 6 and 7 character requirements for codes requires that you have a placeholder. I will also have a video dedicated to that. So number 5 talks about the 7th characters. So certain ICD-10 CM code categories have applicable 7th characters. The applicable 7th character is required for all codes within that category. As the notes in the tabular list instruct, the seventh character must always be the seventh character in the data field. If a code that requires a seventh character is not 6 characters, then that will be a situation where a placeholder will be needed to fill the empty characters. So I will make a video with an example of that, and you'll be able to find that in the course space. Some of the abbreviations, you'll see NEC and NOS. NEC is not elsewhere classified. NOS is not otherwise specified. You will see that in both the alphabetical index, and you will see that in the tabular list as well. Not elsewhere classified means that the doctor did give you a very specific, with details, diagnosis. But a diagnosis that specific does not exist. Oops, sorry about that popping up. I can't stop them. So when that case happens and they don't have a code that is that specific for that diagnosis, it would fall into the code for that type of disorder or condition in the not elsewhere classified code. Not otherwise specified is similar but different. In this case, the doctor or the provider or the surgeon did not give you very specific details about the diagnosis, so you'd have to code it with the unspecified code. Sorry. Now you will see these abbreviations in both the alphabetical and in the tabular listing. Some of the punctuation that you'll see is brackets. So in the tabular section, brackets is used for explanatory phrases, for some additional wording to help you determine that you're at the right code. In the index to diseases, the brackets are used to identify a manifestation code. This is a situation where you are going to need 2 codes. In the index to diseases, you'll look up the specific condition that they've coded, and you will see 2 codes next to it in this situation. The etiology, or the underlying condition, is the first code that it shows you, and then the second code is the manifestation, and that is in italicized brackets. I will also be having a short video loaded up into the course space using one of these examples as well, so you'll be able to see it. Parentheses are used in both the alphabetical index and the tabular listing for supplementary codes and non-essential modifiers. Now, when they talk about non-essential modifiers, they are talking about additional words, not modifiers. If you've taken your CPT code or your HCPC courses, they're not talking about those modifiers that you would add to the code. They're talking about modifiers as in additional words that will be supplementary words that will be in parentheses next to the main term or next to the subterm that will help you determine that you are choosing the correct code. Colons are used in the book exactly the way you would use them in the English grammar, and that would be to identify that a list is going to be following it. The use of and, we'll talk about that a little further down. Other and unspecified codes. So other codes, they are used when the information in the medical record provides detail for which a specific code does not exist. So those are the not elsewhere classified codes. So when a specific code does not exist for it, then you will be coding it with the not elsewhere classified code. So these go hand in hand with the 2 abbreviations that we saw when we first came into this section. And unspecified codes, those are the NOS codes that we talked about earlier. The includes notes, it shows immediate under the 3-character category code. And so it will give you some information on what is included in that code. I'm going to skip number 11 and go to number 12. Now, number 12 talks about the excludes notes. So ICD 10-CM has two types of excludes notes. Each type of note has a different definition to use, but they are similar in that they indicate that the codes that are listed in the excludes note are excluded from each other and are independent of each other. The excludes one, that is telling you that you are at the wrong code. It means that it's not coded here. So a type 1 excludes note is a pure excludes note. It means not coded here. An excludes one note indicates that the code excluded should never be used at the same time as the code above the excludes notes. So that's a little wordy. It's worded that way because the actual note itself, exclude one, is right underneath the code. An exclude one is used when two conditions cannot occur together, such as a congenital form versus an acquired form of the same condition. You can read the bolded, and that will give you some kind of examples. So exclude ones means that it is not coded here. You're at the wrong code. Now, when you see these exclude ones and exclude twos, sometimes they will pertain to the condition that you're coding. And you need them. They become extremely important when the condition you're coding has more than one integral part to it. That's when you're going to have to determine whether you have to code more than one code or just one code. So I have found most often when the exclude one code is true for me, when I read the exclude notes and I go, okay, I'm not coding this condition that I'm coding, this is not the code for it. That is sometimes a good indicator that there is a code that exists that will describe all the integral parts of the condition that you're coding. The excludes two is a little bit different. It is saying that the code does not include the conditions that are listed there. But in the case of the excludes two, if the condition that you're coding has two integral parts to it, the excludes two is saying while that condition or that integral part of that code, while that piece of that code is not here, the piece of that condition is not included in this code, you can find the code for that particular condition and you will be able to use it in addition to the code that the exclude note belongs to. Now, if there's any questions about this, feel free to put it out on the question and answer discussion board, or you can cross message me directly. The etiology and the manifestation convention, this is something that I will also make a video for. I talked about this a little bit earlier. So this is that situation where you look up a condition and it actually has two codes that you are required to use together, and it also indicates in which order you would use them. So the etiology and the manifestation, the etiology would be the first code that it lists, and the manifestation would be the code that is second listed, and it is in the italicized brackets. So this is when you're in the index to diseases. When you take those two codes and you look them up in the tabular section, you will see that if you looked up the manifestation code, it would say code first, the underlying condition. If you looked up the underlying condition, it would say use additional code, and it would give you a list of the code or codes that you could use together with the manifestation code or the underlying condition code. So it does give you quite a bit of direction. This is one of the reasons, and a very important reason, why you want to always select your code. Your final selection of your code does come from the tabular section. Now I will have a video where I will have the code book and I will actually show a code so that you can see what it looks like. So there are some examples here, and I will probably use these actual examples that are in here So you can see what it looks like, and I will explain that. Now the word and, when you see the word and, it should be interpreted to mean either and or or. So it's used for both and or when it appears in a title. And they give you an example. Now the word with, it's interpreted to mean as it being associated with it or due to it. So I have uploaded a video that you will see. It is for the chapter 4 in your textbook, and you'll see that they're using pneumonia, and you will see what the due tos and the withs look like in that video, in that example. You'll also see an example in that video of see and see also. So when you are in the index to diseases, there are some references that you will see there. You'll look up a main term, and it may say see also, and it'll give you some other codes to look at or some other main terms that you should look at. Or it'll say see, and when it says see alone, you may not see, in most cases, you may not see a code assigned to the reference. It'll just direct you to see another area of the index. See also, you will see sometimes a code to the main term that you've looked up, followed by see also, because then it wants you to additionally look at some codes. Then you would make the determination as to which is the actual code you want to use. Code also. So this is a little bit redundant, but you will see also the term code also, and that is in the tabular section, and that's instructing you that 2 codes may be required to fully describe a condition. This particular one, code also, does not provide sequencing directions, whereas when we talked about the etiology and the manifestation, there are some sequencing directions there. The default codes, these are they're similar to when we talk about not otherwise specified. So a code listed to a main term in the ICD-10 CM alphabetical index is referred to as the default code. The default code represents that condition that is most commonly associated with the main term, or it is the unspecified code for the condition. If a condition is documented in a medical record, for example, appendicitis, without any additional information such as acute or chronic, then the default code will be used. So in the other video where the textbook uses pneumonia, that pneumonia is also a default code. It was not very specific. It just said they had pneumonia. And then the subterms below showed you what the higher specificity would be. So if the physician just wrote pneumonia in the diagnosis code, then you would just code the not otherwise specified pneumonia code, which is also referred to as the default code. This is where I'm going to stop on this video. The general coding guidelines, I will not go into those. This is where it explains to you how to actually look up a code, and you've read about that in your book. I just wanted to cover some of the conventions, and I hope that if there were any questions, I've been able to clear them up in this video. And if I have not, then post your question out on the discussion board, or send it to me in a course message. Happy coding.